Well, look who's here, the big manager. My husband and mother-in-law were laughing their heads off about my promotion. The apartment was trashed and the fridge was empty, even though I'd just loaded it up with groceries a couple days ago. My husband went to bed feeling pretty pleased with himself. In the morning, he woke up unemployed and homeless. But before we get started, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks and enjoy. The apartment keys weren't on the entry table where Jessica always left them, but on the kitchen counter instead. A small thing, but enough to set off alarm bells. She closed the door quietly and looked around more carefully. Her work tote wasn't sitting the way she'd positioned it that morning. The zipper was open, though Jessica distinctly remembered zipping it shut before leaving. A manila folder with contracts was sticking out at the wrong angle. Voices drifted from the kitchen. Her husband Jake and his mother Linda were talking about something, their voices rising and falling, occasionally going quiet. Jessica slipped off her heels and padded silently down the hallway. The bedroom door stood slightly ajar. Her makeup bag on the dresser had been moved. Her hand lotion wasn't where she'd left it. The closet door wasn't fully shut, though she always made sure it clicked closed. They'd been going through her things. But why? Jessica came back to the entryway and loudly pulled the door open and shut again, making it sound like she'd just arrived. The kitchen voices cut off instantly. When she walked in, Jake sat at the table with a beer, eyes glued to his phone. Linda stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot. The scene looked perfect, almost staged. Jessica set her bag on a chair and opened the refrigerator. Everything looked normal inside. Groceries in their places, just as she'd left them that morning. Weird. Usually Linda managed to rearrange everything her way within hours, criticize how Jessica organized things, and start cooking something that would leave the stove and oven crusted with grease. She poured herself some water, leaned against the counter, and looked at Jake. He kept his eyes firmly on his screen. Linda continued stirring the pot, though Jessica could clearly see it was just plain water. No actual cooking happening. They'd been looking for something specific. But what? Documents, money. Jessica mentally cataloged the contents of her bag and closets. Nothing shady, nothing secret. Just her employment contract, bank statements, old utility bills. Everything completely legitimate and boring. Her phone buzzed in her blazer pocket. The director's number. Jessica stepped into the hallway and answered. Gerald Richardson's voice had an unusually formal quality to it. He asked if she could come to his office tomorrow at 10 in the morning. He didn't explain why, but his tone told Jessica this wasn't about getting fired or reprimanded. Something else. She confirmed she'd be there, said goodbye, and returned to the kitchen. Jake was now openly staring at her with obvious curiosity. Linda had turned away from the stove. Jessica walked past them both into the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. Let them wonder. Let them sweat it out. She didn't fully understand what was happening yet either. The next morning, Jessica woke up 30 minutes earlier than usual and selected a charcoal gray pantsuit, cream silk blouse, modest black pumps, minimal jewelry, and neutral lipstick. Professional attire for an important meeting. Jake was still sprawled across most of the bed, dead asleep. Linda was already running the kitchen, having helped herself to the expensive Italian roast coffee Jessica had bought 3 days ago and hadn't even opened yet. Her mother-in-law pretended not to notice her, making a show of flipping through a magazine. Jessica grabbed her bag and left without saying goodbye. In the elevator, she double-checked her documents. Driver's license, electronic pay stubs on her phone, college diplomas. Everything accounted for. The office was waking up slowly. Coworkers shuffled toward the break room coffee maker, discussing last night's game and plans for the weekend. Jessica headed to her desk, powered up her computer, and waited until exactly 10 o'clock. The director's executive assistant appeared at her cubicle and nodded. In Gerald Richardson's spacious corner office sat CFO Patricia Morgan and the company's general counsel, David Chin. Jessica greeted them and took the indicated seat, feeling her stomach tighten with nervous energy. Gerald didn't waste time. He announced the company was expanding into a new service area and needed someone to fill the newly created position of Director of Administration. The salary was double what Jessica currently made, plus quarterly performance bonuses and a comprehensive benefits package. All three of them watched her expectantly. Jessica didn't find her voice right away. She'd been with the company 6 years, starting as an entry-level coordinator, slowly working her way up, taking on more responsibility with each passing year. But a director-level position meant a completely different tier of authority, accountability, and opportunity. Patricia added that Jessica had proven herself as a dependable employee who handled documentation well, managed people effectively, and kept her composure during crises. That was exactly the kind of person they needed for this role. Jessica took a breath and accepted. Gerald nodded with approval. David slid a folder across the table containing her new employment contract for review. She'd assumed the position 1 week after completing all the paperwork and transitioning her current responsibilities. Walking out of the office, Jessica ducked into the women's restroom, locked herself in a stall, and pressed her forehead against the cool metal divider. Director of Administration. A salary that would finally let her stop checking her bank balance every other day before the 15th. The authority to make decisions instead of just carrying out someone else's. This was actually happening. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Colleagues asked her questions. She answered automatically while continuing to process paperwork. By late afternoon, news of her promotion had circulated through the office, based on the sideways looks and hushed conversations happening behind her back. Some people were jealous, some were genuinely happy, some were skeptical. Leaving work, Jessica stopped at the big grocery store by her apartment, walked through the aisles, and filled her cart with things she normally passed up because of the price tags. Wild-caught salmon, jumbo shrimp, imported triple cream brie, prosciutto, organic strawberries in February, a bottle of Rioja she'd read about in a food magazine, a fancy chocolate layer cake from the bakery section, fresh pasta, and artisan sauce that cost as much as 3 regular jars. The registered total made her pause for just a second. Jessica swiped her debit card without flinching. Before now, spending this much would have meant eating ramen for lunch all week. Everything was about to change. She hauled the heavy bags toward her car, and for the first time in forever, felt genuinely light inside. Freedom starts the moment you stop being afraid of price tags. Back home, she shouldered through the building's entrance with her grocery bags. The elevator was broken again, naturally. Jessica climbed slowly to the 3rd floor, stopping on each landing to catch her breath. At her apartment door, she fished out her keys and froze. Voices came from inside, not just talking but laughing. Jake's booming laugh and his mother's high-pitched giggle. Jessica unlocked the door and stepped inside. Someone else's beat-up Nikes sat in the entryway. An unfamiliar bomber jacket hung by the door. Company. She walked to the kitchen and set the bags on the counter. From the living room came Linda's voice, speaking to whoever else was there. Jessica started unpacking, pulling out groceries and making room in the fridge. Jake wandered into the kitchen holding a beer bottle. Linda followed, along with 2 other people around their age, a guy and a woman. Jake's co-workers from the construction site, judging by their clothes and demeanor. Jake stopped and gave a low whistle when he saw the grocery bags. Linda immediately started pawing through them, pulling out the shrimp and examining the package. The other woman, heavy-set with badly bleached hair, let out a snorting laugh. Jessica recognized her. Denise from accounting at their company. So word about the promotion had definitely gotten around. Denise loved office gossip, and her presence here was a bad sign. Linda extracted the wine bottle and turned it over in her hands, evaluating it, then found the cake. Jake was already tearing into the salmon packaging, popping pieces straight into his mouth. His buddy reached for the shrimp. Jessica stood by the counter, watching her celebration groceries get devoured without permission or thanks. Denise was saying something about the promotion. Linda was making snide comments. Jake was laughing. Nobody thought to include her or even acknowledge she'd walked in. They just grabbed the food and carried it into the living room where plates and glasses were already set out on the coffee table. Jessica stayed in the kitchen. From the other room came voices, chewing sounds, glasses clinking. They were talking about her promotion. Denise was sharing details, embellishing things, making stuff up. Jake was adding commentary. His mother was interjecting her opinions. They all kept laughing. Jessica sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the empty grocery bags. She'd bought all this to celebrate her success, to share good news with her family. Instead, her accomplishment had become a punchline, and her special dinner had turned into beer snacks for watching TV. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Found Rebecca's number, her law school friend who practiced family law now. Sent a quick text asking for a consultation. Then messaged Paul, the notary she knew from work. One more message to Monica at the staffing agency. All three responded within minutes. Rebecca suggested lunch tomorrow. Paul said he could fit her in day after tomorrow. Monica asked if everything was okay. Jessica kept her response vague, just said she wanted to discuss something. Loud laughter erupted from the living room. Jake was yelling about a touchdown or something. Linda was clapping. Jessica stood up, left the kitchen, and went to her bedroom. She closed and locked the door, turned on the lamp, and lay down on top of the comforter, fully dressed. Her phone rested on the pillow beside her. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the party sounds through the wall. They hadn't even noticed she'd left. Hadn't called for her, hadn't asked about her day. They had zero interest in her happiness, her achievement, or her feelings. 6 years ago, Jessica had met Jake at a company holiday party. He was a site foreman on a construction project her company was managing. Tall, fit, with an easy smile and laid-back personality. When he wanted to be, he could be incredibly charming. He'd pursued her hard. Fancy dinners, flowers, the whole thing. Seemed solid and reliable that they'd got married fast. Jake pushed for it, said there was no point waiting around. Jessica agreed, even though a small voice inside her whispered to slow down. She ignored those doubts. It felt like the right thing at the time. Linda had been perfectly pleasant at the wedding, even sweet. She'd given thoughtful gifts, complimented Jessica, called her daughter. Then 2 years ago, Linda's husband died, and she suddenly announced she was moving in with Jake. He didn't consult Jessica, just told her it was happening. From that point forward, life became a series of small degradations. Constant criticism about housekeeping, complaints about how Jessica cooked, comments about her appearance. Linda gradually took over the kitchen, bathroom, and living room. Jessica was left with just the bedroom, and even that wasn't sacred territory because Linda would barge in without knocking, claiming she'd forgotten something or was bringing in laundry. Jake never stood up for her. He'd say his mom was getting old. She was lonely. They needed to be understanding. But he slowly adopted his mother's tone when speaking to Jessica, becoming critical, demanding, dismissive. Jessica had tried talking to him about it at first, then gave up. There's no point explaining things to someone who doesn't want to hear you. She got up and walked to the closet. From the top shelf, she pulled down an old shoebox. Inside were documents, their marriage certificate, her driver's license, her diplomas, and one more piece of paper, slightly worn around the edges. The deed to the apartment, issued in Jessica and Morrison's name 8 years ago when she'd inherited it from her grandmother and had it transferred into her own name. This apartment belonged to her. Only her. Jake had moved in after they got married as her spouse, but he had no legal ownership. They'd never signed a prenuptial agreement. Jake had joked about it at the time, said why would they need that lawyer stuff when they loved each other. Jessica put the document back, replaced the shoebox, and lay down again. From the living room, the voices continued. The game must have ended because it sounded like the guests were getting ready to leave. The front door eventually opened and closed. Then she heard Jake's heavy footsteps and Linda clattering around in the kitchen, probably leaving all the dishes for tomorrow. Jake took forever in the bathroom, then flopped onto the couch in the living room. He didn't even attempt to come to bed. Linda finished whatever she was doing and retreated to the spare room, the one Jessica had planned to turn into a home office. The apartment fell quiet. Jessica got up, turned on her desk lamp, and opened her laptop. She pulled up the folder with all her scanned documents, the marriage certificate, IDs, property deed, everything. All there, all in order. She created a new folder on her desktop, labeled it with just today's date and numbers, and started methodically copying files into it. Then she opened her browser and began researching. Legal specifics of divorce in her state. Marital property versus separate property. Evicting a spouse and their relatives from separately owned property. Timelines, procedures, requirements. She read carefully, taking screenshots of important sections, bookmarking relevant law firm websites. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 3. Outside the windows, it had been dark for a long time. From the living room came Jake's snoring. Jessica opened a document and started outlining a plan, step by step, with specific timelines and action items. First, consultation with Rebecca to nail down all the legal details. Then meeting with Paul to get necessary documents notarized. Meanwhile, gather documentation in case this ended up in court. Second step, divorce. She could file unilaterally in their state. If Jake didn't contest it, everything would be final in about 90 days. If he fought it, maybe a few months longer, but the outcome wouldn't change. Third step, eviction. The apartment was her separate property, acquired before marriage with no commingling of assets. No, prenup meant Jake had no claim to it. She could evict him through the courts. Probably take 2 to 3 months with all the procedures. Linda would also have to leave since she wasn't family to the property owner once the divorce was final. Jessica saved the document, closed her laptop, and checked the time. 4:30 in the morning. She needed to be up for work in 3 hours. She lay back down but couldn't sleep. Her mind churned through thoughts, plans, possible scenarios. For the first time in years, Jessica didn't feel helpless. She felt coldly certain. She knew what needed to happen and how to make it happen. Most importantly, she wasn't afraid of the consequences anymore. She had nothing left to lose. Whatever respect Jake and Linda might have had for her was long gone, if it had ever existed. Whatever love might have been there had evaporated through constant put-downs and mockery. Only freedom remained, and Jessica was going to take it back, whatever it cost. Outside, dawn started breaking. Somewhere below, a car engine turned over and a door slammed. The city was waking up. Jessica closed her eyes, knowing that in a few hours a new day would begin. The day everything changed. Jake and Linda had no idea yet. They were sleeping peacefully, confident they were in control. But they'd lost control a long time ago. They just hadn't figured it out yet. Jessica finally drifted into brief, dreamless sleep. In the next room on the couch, Jake snored away, completely unaware this was his last night in this apartment as anything resembling its owner. The alarm went off at 6:30. Jessica silenced it and got up, not feeling tired despite barely 2 hours of sleep. Her system was running on adrenaline and steely resolve. She went to the bathroom, locked the door, and stood under scalding water for a long time. The shower washed away what remained of her uncertainty. By the time she stepped out and wrapped herself in her robe, the plan had solidified completely. Jessica returned to the bedroom and opened her closet. She pulled out a navy suit, crisp white shirt, simple black heels. Minimal jewelry, just a thin gold necklace, tiny diamond studs, and her watch. She pulled her hair back in a neat, low bun, applied subtle makeup with slightly stronger eyeliner. The image of an executive, professional, and composed. She grabbed her bag and left the bedroom. The apartment was silent. Jake was crashed out on the living room couch. Linda hadn't emerged yet. Jessica walked into the kitchen and stopped cold in the doorway. The table was covered in dirty dishes, plates crusted with dried food, wine-stained glasses, forks and knives scattered everywhere, crumpled napkins, crumbs, and what looked like a crushed shrimp littered the floor. The smell of stale wine mixed with old seafood. The trash can overflowed, lid propped open by garbage. Jessica opened the fridge. Completely empty. Every shelf bare, as if someone had cleaned it out completely. No shrimp, no salmon, no cheese. Even the strawberries were gone. Just the empty cake box sitting on the bottom shelf. She pulled out her phone and systematically photographed everything. Wide angle of the kitchen disaster, close-ups of the table, the open empty fridge, the overflowing trash. Every shot clear and well lit. Then she photographed yesterday's grocery receipt she'd left in her bag. Date, time, total, itemized list. She uploaded everything to her cloud storage and emailed the photos to herself. Backup copies secured. Jessica closed the fridge, picked up her bag, and walked out of the apartment. No breakfast, no cleaning. They could deal with their own mess. She arrived at work 45 minutes early. The building was mostly empty, just the security guard half asleep at his desk. Jessica went to her workstation, booted up her computer, and waited exactly 9 o'clock. There was a knock. The executive assistant informed her that in 15 minutes there would be a meeting in the main conference room. Official announcement of the new director of administration. Jessica grabbed her portfolio and pen, checked herself quickly in her compact mirror. Everything looked right. Calm expression, shoulders back, confident posture. The conference room was packed. Staff from every department had shown up, some looking curious, some skeptical. Jessica took a seat beside Gerald Richardson. He stood and tapped his pen against his water glass. The director gave a brief speech about company growth, new objectives, the need for strong administrative leadership. Then he introduced Jessica as the new director of administration, listing her accomplishments and contributions over 6 years. Applause followed, not especially warm, but appropriately polite. Patricia stood and handed Jessica a bouquet. David shook her hand with a formal congratulations. Jessica thanked them, said a few words about living up to their confidence in her, and sat back down. The meeting continued with discussion of ongoing projects. She listened closely, taking notes, memorizing names and roles. After the meeting, coworkers approached her. Some offered genuine congratulations. Others were clearly just going through the motions. Denise from accounting glared from across the room and left without speaking. Jessica didn't care. She knew jealousy when she saw ITWY11. She was back at her new office. It was significantly larger than her old cubicle. Proper desk, ergonomic chair, filing cabinets, dual monitors. A stack of folders already sat on the desk marked urgent. Jessica sat down, logged into her computer, and accessed the company's HR database. She now had clearance to view all personnel files, employment contracts, disciplinary records, bonuses, and time-off requests. She typed into the search field, Jake Morrison. The system pulled up his file. Jessica opened it and started reading. Site foreman, Section 3. 7 years with the company. Associate degree in construction management. Salary slightly above average for his position. 3 pay increases during his tenure. On paper, looked acceptable, but then things got interesting. The disciplinary section ran 4 pages. Jessica scrolled through, scanning entries. Repeated tardiness to job sites. Written warning. More tardiness. Second written warning. Altercation with crew supervisor. Formal reprimand. Missed project deadline. Final written warning. Safety protocol violation. Suspension entered into permanent record. Client complaint about unprofessional conduct. Additional formal reprimand. The pattern got progressively worse. Jessica reached the most recent entries and stopped. 3 months ago, there'd been an internal investigation. A client discovered a shortage of materials valued at approximately $32,000. The investigation focused on the site foreman, meaning Jake. They'd begun the process, conducted inventory audits, interviewed witnesses. Then everything just stopped. The file showed a memo from Gerald Richardson. Investigation suspended due to personal circumstances. Material shortage to be written off as operational loss. Employee receives final warning. Jessica leaned back in her chair. Personal circumstances. That meant her. Management knew Jake was married to one of their employees and gave him a break. They went easy on him to avoid creating problems internally. Jake should have been fired 3 months ago. He'd kept his job because he was married to Jessica. The irony was almost funny. She kept digging through documents. Found email exchanges between Gerald and the construction operations manager. The operations guy complained constantly about Jake. Repeated violations, conflicts with the crew, carelessness, poor judgment. Asked multiple times for authorization to terminate him. Gerald kept refusing, citing the personal situation. Jessica closed the file and thought about it. Jake had been hanging on by a thread for over a year. He'd stayed employed entirely because of her, and she'd had no idea. He'd acted like everything was great, like he was some irreplaceable hotshot at the company. Someone knocked. Jessica looked up. A woman in her early 60s wearing a professional dress suit stood in the doorway. Silver hair swept into an elegant twist. Dorothy Williams, her predecessor as Director of Administration. Jessica invited her in. Dorothy sat across from her and placed a thick folder on the desk. She began walking Jessica methodically through department structure, responsibility distribution, interdepartmental dynamics. Jessica listened closely, asked clarifying questions. Dorothy spoke calmly and professionally, but then paused, made direct eye contact, and lowered her voice. She said that in every company there are employees who are retained not because of their performance, but for other reasons. Family connections, personal relationships with management, legacy considerations. Those employees often become complacent, stop performing adequately, and create ongoing problems. Jessica nodded, understanding where this was heading. Dorothy wasn't naming names, but the implication was crystal clear. Dorothy added that Jessica was now in leadership. Her job was protecting the company's interests. Personal feelings and family relationships couldn't factor into business decisions. If someone wasn't performing, they needed to be let go. If they violated policies, they needed to face consequences. Otherwise, the whole system suffered. Jessica thanked her for being direct. Dorothy stood, wished her luck, and left. Alone again, Jessica reopened Jake's personnel file, reread every entry, studied the dates and circumstances. The picture was damning. Her husband was a liability who'd been protected solely because of his connection to her. She closed the file and looked out her window. Clouds drifted past. Below, traffic moved through downtown streets. Just another ordinary day in an ordinary city. While her life was quietly turning inside out, Jessica pulled out her phone and texted Rebecca. Her friend responded immediately, confirming lunch tomorrow. Then she texted Paul the notary. He confirmed their appointment for the day after tomorrow. Everything was proceeding on schedule. She just had to make it through until evening. The workday crawled. Jessica processed paperwork, reviewed current projects, met with her team. By late afternoon, her head was pounding from information overload, but she kept going. She couldn't show any weakness on day one. A T7, she packed up and headed home. She stopped at a different grocery store and bought only basics: bread, milk, eggs, vegetables. No special items, just enough for a couple days for one person. Walking up to her building, Jessica heard voices from inside her apartment while she was still in the stairwell. Loud, cheerful voices. More company. She unlocked the door and spotted the same worn-out sneakers in the entryway as yesterday. Jessica stepped inside and closed the door. From the living room came Linda's voice, sharp and mocking. "Well, look who showed up. The big director." Explosive laughter. Jake was laughing so hard he started coughing. Someone else joined in. A chorus of mockery. Jessica walked to the living room and looked in. Jake, Linda, and yesterday's crew, Denise and her husband, were sprawled on the couch. The coffee table was littered with beer bottles, chip bags, peanuts, and wine spills. The TV blared some reality show that nobody was actually watching. They were all staring at her instead. Linda was wiping away tears of laughter. Jake was draining his beer with a satisfied smirk. Denise was giggling behind her hand. "So how's it feel up there on your throne?" Jake puffed out his cheeks, mimicking self-importance. More laughter. Denise's husband made some crack about female bosses. Linda nodded enthusiastically in agreement. Jessica turned without a word and went to the kitchen. Behind her, they kept laughing, riffing on jokes about her promotion, egging each other on. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Dirty dishes piled in the sink and across the counters. Crumbs everywhere, spilled wine, cigarette butts in a dish, even though Jessica never allowed smoking inside. The fridge stood partially open, completely empty inside. She'd just stocked it days ago with hundreds of dollars of groceries. Now there was nothing. She set her grocery bags on the counter and started unpacking. Linda appeared in the kitchen doorway, surveyed the bags, and made a disapproving face. Her mother-in-law announced that since Jessica now had such a big fancy salary, she should be paying for all the groceries and household bills. Jake worked hard physical labor. His money needed to be his own for personal use. A man shouldn't have to spend his paycheck on domestic expenses. He should feel financially free. Jessica stood there silently. Linda got wound up, ticking off exactly what Jessica was now obligated to cover. Rent, electric, gas, water, cable, internet, cell phones, all groceries obviously, cleaning supplies, everything else. Jake appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. He nodded, backing up his mother's demands, said it was only fair. Jessica was management now. She had the income, so she should contribute to the household. He'd spend his own paycheck on himself. Maybe upgrade his truck, maybe take a guy's trip somewhere decent. Jessica looked at them both calmly, her face expressionless. Then she nodded, said sure, she'd cover all the expenses. No problem. Jake could spend his money however he wanted. Linda and Jake exchanged surprised glances, clearly not expecting her to fold so easily. Linda smiled triumphantly. Jake clapped Jessica on the shoulder, called her a smart girl, and walked back to the living room. Jessica continued putting away groceries. Linda lingered a moment longer, then also left. From the other room came more laughter and clinking bottles. They were celebrating another small victory. Jessica pulled from her bag a folder of documents she'd brought from home that morning. Property deed in her name, marriage certificate, copies of both their driver's licenses. Everything neatly organized, ready to use. She put the folder back in her bag and went to the bedroom. Changed into comfortable clothes, lay down on the bed, picked up a book. She couldn't actually focus on reading. Her mind was elsewhere. But she held the book up, maintaining the appearance of being absorbed in it. From the living room came the sounds of the guests overstaying their welcome. They stuck around until after 11, talking loudly, laughing, making noise. Finally, the front door opened and closed. They were gone. Jessica heard Jake stumbling around in the bathroom, water running. Linda was making racket in the kitchen, predictably leaving everything dirty until morning. Jake took forever in the shower, finally emerged and collapsed on the living room couch. Didn't even try to make it to the bedroom. Linda finished her kitchen business and went to her room. The apartment door slammed. Quiet settled over everything. Jessica got up, threw on her robe, and walked out to the kitchen. Linda was finishing off the last of the chips while flipping through a celebrity magazine. She looked up when Jessica entered and frowned. Jessica sat down at the table across from her mother-in-law, looked her directly in the eye, and said calmly that by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, Linda needed to have her room cleared out. A moving company would arrive to help transport her belongings. Linda stared at her, then burst out laughing, harsh and incredulous. She asked if Jessica had completely lost her mind. Jessica didn't smile. She pulled a folded document from her robe pocket, smoothed it out, and placed it in front of Linda. The property deed, issued 8 years ago in the name of Jessica and Morrison. Official seal, signatures, date. She explained it simply and clearly. This apartment belonged to her. Only her. Jake had moved in after they married, but had no legal ownership rights. No prenuptial agreement existed. Linda was living here with no legal basis whatsoever, just as a guest Jake invited without the actual owner's permission. Linda had her own place across town. Time to go back there. Linda's face went from flushed red to pale white. She grabbed the paper, squinted at it, ran her finger over the text, then threw it down and jumped to her feet. She started yelling that this was illegal, that Jessica couldn't do this, that Jake would come explain everything. She stormed toward the bedroom, threw the door open, and started shaking her son awake. Jake sat up groggily, confused about what was happening. His mother dragged him by the arm, practically hauled him out to the kitchen. He stumbled out barefoot in his boxers and undershirt, barely awake. Linda shoved the property deed at him, jabbed her finger toward Jessica. Jake squinted at the document, trying to focus in the dim light. Jessica reached over and flipped on the overhead light. Jake looked at the paper again. His expression slowly changed as reality sank in. He asked what this meant. Jessica answered evenly. It meant the apartment was hers. His mother was leaving tomorrow. His own situation would be resolved in the morning at work. Jake looked confused. What situation? What was she talking about? Jessica said. You'll find out at work in the morning. She turned and walked to the bedroom, shut and locked the door behind her. Outside, chaos erupted. Jake pounded on the door, demanding she open up and explain. Linda was shrieking, calling Jessica heartless, ungrateful, cursing her out. Jessica lay on the bed, placed her phone beside her, and started voice recording. Let all their threats and abuse get documented. Might be useful if this ended up in court. The yelling continued for maybe 20 minutes. Then it died down. Footsteps retreated. Linda's door slammed. Then silence. Jessica stopped the recording, uploaded it to her cloud storage, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow was going to be rough, but she was ready. More than ready. Sleep came surprisingly fast, deep and dreamless. Her body was resting up before the critical day ahead. In the next room, Linda sat awake on her bed, frantically calling relatives and friends, telling anyone who'd listen what a terrible person her daughter-in-law had turned out to be, looking for sympathy and advice, working herself up. I end the living room. Jake lay on the couch trying to process what had happened. The apartment wasn't his. Okay, but what did work have to do with anything? What did Jessica mean about the morning? He picked up his phone, thought about calling her, then didn't. Number blocked. Texting wouldn't work either. Jessica wasn't responding to anything. Jake closed his eyes, trying to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Thoughts spun through his mind, each one more anxious than the last. Something had gone very wrong. Seriously wrong. Tomorrow he'd find out exactly how wrong. The alarm went off at 6:30. Jessica turned it off and got up. Outside, dawn was just starting to break. The apartment was dead quiet. Somewhere in the back, Linda was snoring. Jessica went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, pulled herself together. Sharp navy suit, minimal makeup, hair slicked back. Professional appearance. Today mattered. She returned to the bedroom, got her phone, and called a saved number. Someone picked up quickly. Jessica confirmed the appointment for 10 that morning, gave the address, verified the crew size. 3 movers, truck, 2-hour job. Already paid for. She ended the call, packed her bag with documents, laptop, and files. Everything the same, as always. Except inside, cold determination had replaced everything else. Jake appeared in the hallway, disheveled, wearing sweatpants and a ratty t-shirt. Bloodshot eyes, creased face. He blocked her path, arms crossed. Jake demanded answers. What was last night about? What was this apartment nonsense? What was she hinting about with work? Jessica walked around him, heading for the door. We'll discuss it at work. I have a meeting at 9. Jake grabbed her arm and spun her around. Jessica calmly pulled free, looked him dead in the eye. No emotion, just ice. Don't touch me. Ever. Her tone made Jake step back. Jessica left the apartment, locked the door, and went down to her car. Started the engine. In the rear-view mirror, she caught a glimpse of their apartment window. Jake stood there looking down. Let him look. Jessica got to work 45 minutes early. The building was empty except for security. She went to her office, powered up, and arranged her documents. Jake Morrison's personnel file, printed summaries of disciplinary actions, copies of client complaints, internal investigation materials. A T845, she called the executive assistant and requested an urgent meeting with Gerald Richardson and David Chin. Critical personnel matter. A T9 o'clock sharp, she entered the director's office. Gerald and David were already there waiting. Jessica sat down, opened her folder, spread documents across the conference table, and began speaking calmly and factually. Construction employee Jake Morrison had accumulated a critical number of disciplinary violations: chronic tardiness, interpersonal conflicts with coworkers and clients, repeated missed deadlines, safety violations. 3 months ago, an internal investigation was suspended regarding a significant materials shortage. The stated reason for suspension was personal circumstances, but those circumstances had changed. Jessica looked up at Gerald. He listened without interrupting. David was reviewing documents, making notes. She continued. According to state labor law and company policy, when an employee accumulates 3 or more serious disciplinary actions within 12 months, the employer has grounds for termination. Morrison had 7 in the past year, plus the suspended investigation that could be reopened. David nodded. Legally, everything checked out. More than sufficient cause for termination. Gerald leaned back in his chair, studying Jessica carefully. You understand we're talking about your husband. I do, but I'm director of administration now. My responsibility is protecting this company's interests. You promoted me to this position because you trust my professional judgment. I can't make exceptions for family members. The director was quiet for a moment, then nodded. David was already drafting the termination letter. Jake Morrison was being dismissed under Company Policy Section 4.3 for repeated violations of conduct standards and failure to meet performance requirements. The document was printed. Gerald signed it. Jessica initialed it in her capacity as Director of Administration. David affixed the corporate seal. Done. Formalities complete. Jake Morrison's employment was terminated effective immediately. Jessica returned to her office and called facility security. Requested immediate deactivation of an employee badge. Provided the name and ID number. Security confirmed it was done. Now she just had to wait. Jake arrived at the job site around 10, parked in his usual spot, walked toward the site trailer, and swiped his badge at the door lock. Red light. Access denied. Did he try again? Red light again. Jake turned to the site supervisor standing nearby. The guy checked his tablet, scrolled through something, then looked up. Your badge has been deactivated. You're not authorized on site anymore. You need to contact main office. Jake didn't understand. He pulled out his phone and called Jessica. She answered on the 3rd ring. I'm at the site. They're not letting me in. What the hell is going on? I'm coming down. Jessica left her office 3 minutes later, took the elevator down, and walked across the parking lot to where Jake stood by the security gate. She stopped about 6 feet away and looked at him like he was a complete stranger. Effective today, your employment is terminated. Cause: repeated violations of company policy and performance standards. You can collect your final documentation from HR. Your personal items from the site will be shipped to you within 5 business days. Jake stood there with his mouth hanging open. Then he took a step forward. Are you insane? You fired me? I've been here 7 years. You were here. Now you're not. Security, please escort this individual off company property. A security guard approached and touched Jake's elbow. Jake jerked away and started yelling. Jessica turned and walked back toward the building without looking back. Behind her, she could hear shouting, cursing, threats. She didn't turn around once. Back in her office, Jessica closed the door, and sat down. Her hands trembled slightly. She balled them into fists until they stopped. It was done. No turning back now. Her phone started blowing up with calls. Jake, Jake, Jake over and over. Jessica declined every call and blocked his number. 30 minutes later, David knocked and entered with a folder. Everything was processed. Final paycheck calculated. Severance package determined. Benefits terminated. Jessica thanked him and locked the documents in her filing cabinet. The workday continued normally. Paperwork, meetings, calls. Co-workers gave her strange looks, but nobody asked direct questions. Word about Jake's termination had already spread through the company grapevine, based on the whispered conversations happening in hallways. During lunch, Jessica stayed in her office, eating a protein bar rather than facing the cafeteria crowd. She didn't want to deal with Denise and the other gossips. 3 p.m. a text came through from the moving company supervisor. Job complete. Subject's belongings delivered to specified address. Signature received. Jessica sent the final payment. So Linda was out of the apartment. Good. The afternoon dragged on forever. Jessica maintained her composure but felt everything churning underneath. She knew what waited for her at home. Jake had definitely gone straight there after the job site at T7. She packed up and drove home. Took her time, mentally preparing. Jake's truck sat in front of the building. Jessica parked beside it, took the stairs up slowly. She could hear yelling before she even reached her floor. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. Boxes and bags and loose belongings were scattered everywhere. Jake and Linda stood in the living room. Linda was crying hysterically, makeup running down her face. Jake was on his phone screaming at someone. Jessica walked past them, took off her shoes, hung up her jacket. Jake threw his phone on the couch and whipped around toward her. You did all this. Jessica opened her bag and pulled out 2 envelopes, held one out to Jake. Divorce petition. I filed this morning. You can contest it or not. Either way, the divorce is happening. Jake snatched the envelope and ripped it open without reading it, throwing the papers on the floor. Jessica held out the second envelope. Eviction notice. This apartment is my separate property, documented and legal. You have 72 hours to remove your belongings. After that, the locks get changed. You can't do this. Linda shrieked. This is illegal. We'll call the police. Go ahead. They'll show you the same property documents I have. This apartment was transferred into my name 8 years ago before I got married. No prenup exists. Jake has no ownership rights. You, Linda, have even less. You have your own place, which is where you went today. Jake moved toward her, his face twisted with rage. I will destroy you. I'll tell everyone what kind of person you really are. Think you'll still have respect at work after people find out you fired your own husband. Jessica looked at him calmly, no emotion showing. Go ahead and tell people. And I'll tell them about the $32,000 in missing materials, about how you took kickbacks from subcontractors, about how you stole equipment from inventory and sold it. Yeah, I found everything. The internal investigation from 3 months ago was suspended only because I was your wife. Gerald didn't want to destroy my life with a scandal, but I'm not your wife anymore. And if you threaten me, I'll have that investigation reopened. The evidence exists. Witnesses exist. A forensic audit will show exactly where those materials went. Your choice. Quietly leave my apartment or face criminal charges. Jake went pale. His lips moved, but no sound came out. You thought nobody knew, Jessica continued. The investigation was stopped as a favor to me, not to you. Management protected you because of me. Now there's no reason to protect you. Decide what you want. Walk away quietly or get prosecuted. Jake stood frozen like a statue. Linda was sobbing, but had gone quiet. Jessica walked to the bedroom, closed and locked the door, and lay down on the bed staring at the ceiling. Outside the door, complete silence. Then footsteps and the front door slamming. She got up and looked out. The apartment was empty. Jake and Linda were gone. Jessica walked through the rooms. Living room was a mess. Kitchen had dirty dishes. Linda's room was cleared out except for trash on the floor. Jessica grabbed a garbage bag and started cleaning, methodically, taking her time. Threw out everything unnecessary, wiped down surfaces, washed dishes. By midnight, the apartment was spotless. She showered, changed into pajamas, made chamomile tea, and sat in the kitchen, looking out the window at the city lights below. Her phone stayed silent. Jessica checked to make sure she hadn't accidentally blocked important numbers. Everything was fine. Jake was just quiet for now, processing everything. She went to bed late and fell asleep immediately. For the first time in a week, she slept peacefully. Morning came with an unusual sound, silence. Complete, absolute silence. No Linda snoring in the next room. No Jake stomping around. No loud TV. Jessica got up, made a real breakfast for herself. Coffee, scrambled eggs, toast. Sat at the table eating slowly, scrolling through news on her tablet. After breakfast, she dressed and went to work. The day proceeded normally. Meetings, documentation, decisions. Colleagues congratulated her on settling into the director role so smoothly. Nobody mentioned Jake directly. Only Denise cornered her in the break room and muttered something about karma and cold-hearted people. Jessica just smiled politely and walked away on the third day. Jake showed up for his belongings. Jessica had taken the day off specifically for this, stayed home to supervise. She opened the door and let him in without speaking. He went to the bedroom and started packing his clothes, shoes, personal items. Said nothing. Jessica stood in the doorway watching. Jake made 3 trips down to his truck, carrying bags and boxes. Finally, he was done. He stopped in the doorway on his way out. Looked at Jessica one last time. "You're going to regret this." Jessica said nothing. She closed the door, turned the deadbolt, and put on the security chain. 2 hours later, a locksmith she'd scheduled arrived. He changed the locks on the front door and the bedroom door, left Jessica with 3 sets of new keys. She paid him, saw him out, and tested the locks. Perfect. The apartment was truly, completely hers now. The next several days fell into a new rhythm. Work, home, work again. Jessica adjusted to living alone. Mornings, she woke up naturally, made herself breakfast, drank coffee in peaceful quiet. Evenings, she came home to a clean apartment where nobody made messes, yelled on phone calls, or criticized everything she did. Work. People gradually adapted to the situation. Some judged Jessica for what they saw as ruthlessness. Others admired her decisiveness. She ignored both groups and focused on her job. Jake struggled to find new employment. He went on interviews but kept getting rejected. His references from the company were technically accurate but unenthusiastic. And word about why he'd been fired spread quickly through professional networks. Linda went back to her own apartment and sent Jessica long, rambling text messages every day. Angry, guilt-tripping messages full of accusations and threats. Jessica deleted them without reading. Other relatives got involved too. Jake's sister called and screamed at her about destroying the family. Jessica's own mother called, voice shaking with anger, asking how she could do this. What would people think? How could she face anyone now? Jessica calmly said she'd done what needed to be done. Then ended the call. A week passed. Then 2. Life settled into a new pattern. Jessica sat in her kitchen one evening with coffee, watching darkness fall outside. Her phone lay on the table, showing notifications she'd been ignoring. Jake had called 4 times today. She hadn't answered. Linda had sent 3 more messages. Jessica hadn't opened them. Jake's sister left another voicemail with more accusations. A distant cousin on her mother's side texted, asking her to reconsider, to fix things, to go back to how it was before. Jessica opened her phone settings and blocked all those numbers. One by one. Final. Silence. The apartment was clean. The fridge had food she'd bought for herself. Nobody would eat it without asking. Drink her coffee, rearrange her things, freedom. but strangely, she didn't feel joy. Just exhaustion and an odd emptiness. Jessica walked to the window. Below, traffic moved through streets. The city continued on, indifferent to her personal upheaval. She understood what lay ahead. The divorce process official and drawn out. Court proceedings, asset division, though there wasn't much to divide. Workplace gossip that wouldn't die down for months. Judgment from acquaintances, relatives, random people. She'd be labeled as cruel, heartless, the woman who fired her own husband and threw him out on the street. Her career would take a hit too. Directors who terminate family members raise uncomfortable questions. Gerald looked at her differently now, with respect mixed with wariness. Was it worth it? Jessica went back to the table and opened her laptop, pulled up a job search site, scrolled through listings. Director of Operations in Portland, VP of Administration in Denver, Chief of Staff position in Boston. Maybe it was time for a completely fresh start. Move somewhere nobody knew her story, where she could just work without her past hanging over everything. She bookmarked a few positions, not to apply immediately, just as possibilities. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Jessica answered. You're going to regret this. Jake's voice, hoarse and bitter. Think it's over? I'll find a way to make you pay. Jessica hung up without responding, blocked the number, muted her phone completely. She stood and walked to the window, looked at her reflection in the dark glass. Tired face, shadows under her eyes, tight expression. Not the person who got married 6 years ago. Someone different now. Harder, colder, better or worse. She didn't know. Jessica turned off the kitchen light, went to her bedroom, lay down and stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence. Freedom always costs something. She'd paid with her reputation, her family relationships, her peace of mind. Did she regret it? No, she didn't regret it. Because for the first time in years, she could breathe freely, make her own choices, live life on her terms instead of Jake's and Linda's. It was worth the price. Jessica closed her eyes. Sleep came eventually. No nightmares, no anxiety. Just the deep rest of someone who made a hard decision and didn't back down. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new challenges, new complications. But it would be her day, her life, her freedom. And nobody was taking that away from her ever again.